So as the people.
Sorry, Penny, go on.
Sorry, are people listening in now then? Have we started?
We are, yes. Yeah, so we've got some people joining us. So welcome everyone to a conversation with. So give us a hi or something in the chat. So there's a chat function at the bottom there, so you feel free to talk to us and say hello to us. Oh, Rachel said hello,
Rachel,
lovely lady.
hi,
Rachel, hi.
Hi, Rachel. So I'm absolutely delighted that we've got a conversation today with these two wonderful ladies. My name is Emma Smith. I'm the project manager with Empowered Conversations, which is an Age UK Salford project. I'm going to hand over to Penny to introduce herself and then Sharon.
My name's Penny Foulds. I work for a clinical research organisation called MAC Clinical Research. I formerly worked at Lancaster University in the laboratories and have now hold the position of honorary researcher at Lancaster University. And I founded the charity attached to the university called Defying Dementia. And I also founded and run the Bay Dementia Information Hub and the Foulds Coast Information Hub. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My repertoire isn't quite as amazing as Penny's, but I work for the Alzheimer Society, and I work on a help desk for a service called Join Dementia Research, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this afternoon. So I'll hand back to Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. I was sat there thinking, I'm so glad I didn't go to introduce either of you with your long, amazing work that you're doing. So thank you. I've got a trial going on today, and I haven't told Penny, I have told Sharon that the 8-month-old puppy is in the room. She's been for a walk, so I think we're okay. So we'll just see how we get on with that. If I suddenly mute and disappear, that's why.
Well, maybe you can let us have a look.
Do you want to have a little look?
Yes.
So that's I think you only get to see a little black shadow and some little toes. So I've got an old girl.
Oh, no. Oh, we're making an appearance.
Oh, how lovely.
An old lady at one end and a young lady at the other end.
Lovely.
So we'll see how we get on. So as I said, I work for Empowered Conversations, and we offer communication courses for family carers across Greater Manchester. And we also have a program called Empowered Carers, which is one-to-one support. Penny, that's where your friend Rachel works. So she offers one-to-one support for family carers. That's just in Salford. And as a result of COVID, we've gone online with a lot of things. Webinars are one of those, along with discos and singing groups and you name it. We've just tried lots of different things to offer people ways to engage, to connect and to learn. So I don't even know how many webinars we've done now, but they've been really popular. And what I've really enjoyed is that we've been able to take quite high level conference information out to everybody. So you don't have to go to a conference anymore. You can just sit at home and just join us for a conversation. So I've really enjoyed doing those. So that is my little bit of spiel. Oh, I've got one last thing to say. So at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A function. So this is for our attendees, so you can drop us a question at any time. We'll pick those questions up at the end. We won't pick them up mid conversation. And so yes, we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. So we'll have a talk from Penny and Sharon, and at the end we'll come together for a Q&A. So rather than write it down or try and remember your question at any point, you can just pop it into the Q&A. So I think that is all from me today. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. I am going to hand over to Penny, and I'm going to mute myself now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma. Anybody who's heard me speak before will know that I do have a tendency to go on and on and on and on and never shut up, and I do have a lot to say. So what I'll do, I'll just do sort of a brief overview of everything, and then if there's anything in specifically that people are interested in, or something maybe that I've not spoken about, with the with that news coming out on Monday about the the Biogen drug. If there's any questions about that, you know, I'm happy to answer them. But my story, starting at the beginning, started when I used to be a school teacher, a chemistry teacher in a large comprehensive school in Morecambe. And I had 2 children, and I was a single parent, and both my grandparents were diagnosed with Alzheimer's within 6 months of each other. So it was a difficult time, but ultimately it did give me an idea of what it's like to be a carer. And also, I did struggle with the lack of information and getting support for them at the time. Things are better now. They're not great, but they are a bit better. But ultimately, as a scientist, it did draw me towards trying to find out information about what happens in the brain of somebody who develops one of these brain conditions, whether a type of dementia, of course, Alzheimer's being the main one, but other forms of neurodegeneration when the brain cells start to weaken and then they start to die. And there's lots and lots of different types of dementia, as you know, and also Parkinson's as well is classed as a neurodegenerative disorder as well. So after my nan and granddad, ultimately, they both died within a week of each other. And after 63 years of marriage, but it was good that I suppose, it was difficult at the time, of course, but after that, I did reassess things myself and got the opportunity to go back to university, and I went back to Lancaster University to do a PhD in the biochemistry of brains of different types of neurodegenerative disorders. In other words, Alzheimer's, the different types of dementia, you know, for example, Lewy body dementia and, you know, frontal temporal dementia and Parkinson's as well. So I always thought I'd go back to school. Unfortunately, there wasn't really a position for me to go back to the same school, and so I applied for funding from the Medical Research Council and worked at the university for 9 years, or maybe a bit longer actually. But during that time, I was part of a team that was working on a drug that was targeted at the plaques that develop in the brains of people living with Alzheimer's. So we developed a drug, a mechanism to enable the brain to rid itself of those amyloid plaques that build up. And actually the drug that has just been approved by the FDA in America is actually targeting those very same plaques. We ran out of funding. We got most of the funding actually, Sharon, from the Alzheimer Society, but ultimately, because the drug had got to a point that it wasn't being developed anymore, we wanted to get it to the next stage. We wanted to try and test it out in people. And to do that, of course, you can't just give it to somebody. You've got to test it in models first. And that costs money. We weren't able to get the money from the Alzheimer Society. They don't fund that sort of research. So we started the Define Dementia campaign, and that's still going now. Define Dementia is a university charity, really, but it funds a postdoctorate researcher full-time in the lab and also a PhD student. Now, I work for Mac Clinical Research. They have contributed towards that PhD student working on the drug, and also they are willing, hopefully, that they will be able to take the drug ultimately into human clinical trials. And I could talk a lot about the different sorts of trials and what's involved, but that's sort of detracting away of what I wanted to tell you about today. So I left the laboratory. Laboratory work is fabulous, but it's not good on your back. And I was getting too old for it. So I actually was offered a position at Mac Clinical Research. So now what I do, I actually am the neuroscience team leader at Mac, and I coordinate clinical trials for brain conditions. So we've just finished a study on Alzheimer's. And at the moment, we've got a couple of studies going. And they've actually focused, excuse me, got a bit of a fog. They've actually focused on Parkinson's dementia, dementia with Lewy bodies, and mild cognitive impairment. This study is a really, really interesting one. I'll tell you a bit about it just in case anybody is interested. It's actually looking at a drug that is already prescribed for another condition. It's an asthma drug, believe it or not. And this asthma drug, there's been known for, it's been prescribed, you know, millions of times across the globe. And there was anecdotal evidence that people who were taking this drug felt better. Their daily lives improved. They felt more alert, their learning was better, their memory was better, their sleep patterns were better, they felt improved mood-wise. And it is thought that this drug actually increases the blood flow in and out of the brain. So usually with an asthma drug, you want to increase the amount of air and oxygen that gets into the lungs, and so it sort of dilates the airways. It actually has the same effect on the muscle that surrounds the blood vessels that go in and out of your brain. It's called cerebral perfusion, but it makes sense, you see, if you think about it, if you get more oxygen into the brain, if you get more food into the brain, and if you can flush out all the waste stuff, you know, all the carbon dioxide, all the toxins that built up, it does make sense, actually, that you might expect it to have a difference. So this is the first clinical trial to actually scientifically prove that it works as a drug for neurodegenerative disease. So it is actually, I'm really, really excited, because if the test results come back and this is seen as having a statistical effect, you know, it's all down to maths at the end. If we can prove that this works, it's going to have a huge impact. It's going to be huge. It won't just be for Parkinson's dementia and dementia with Lewy bodies. It potentially could help everybody, including people with Alzheimer's, including people with vascular dementia, and loads of other conditions as well. The list is endless. So I'm really excited about this. The study has started. There's there's a couple of strands of it. I won't go into the details, but you know, I can forward you some information, or you can have a chat with somebody on the phone if you're interested. So I talk about, in the olden days before lockdown, I used to do a lot of talking, you know, at the meetings and conferences, and talk about the benefits of being involved in clinical research. And Sharon, I'm sure will echo everything that I say, but I can tell you that I have got friends who have been on my studies. They've just turned out to, most of my friends are living with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease because my life has been so wrapped up in my work for such a long time. If you're involved in the study, you actually feel empowered. You are actually trying to help yourself, the awareness, you know, the information that you can get. My friend Terry, who's got Alzheimer's, he's tried to get onto 3 of my studies so far, and he's failed at each time because his Alzheimer's isn't progressed enough. And every time he comes forward for a study, he gets a brain scan, and those results are given back to him. So he was actually diagnosed 8 years ago, and on diagnosis, he asked the doctor, how long have I got, doctor? And the doctor says, well, the average length of time is about 8 years. So if it wasn't for the fact that he had tried to get onto the studies, then he wouldn't know how he was getting on, because of course, you know, I don't need to tell you, there's very, very little, in fact, no post-diagnostic support, unfortunately, for people living with dementia. You know, there is a bit with Parkinson's, you know, there are Parkinson's nurses, and certainly if you're diagnosed with cancer, there's a lot of support, isn't there? But the way that things have turned out, you know, people with dementia are sadly lacking that opportunity to access support. So, I think I'll probably pass on to Sharon now, because I'm sure that she can give you a bit more information about how, as a researcher, I can use the Joint Dementia Research campaign and register to enable my research to take place. So thank you very much.
Are you on mute, Emma?
Thank you so much, Sharon, for pointing out that I was on mute. Thank you so much for that. It was really, really interesting, and it's just started some questions in my head. So while people are maybe formulating their own questions to ask, I thought I might jump in there. So, you know, with the news on Monday about the Biogen drug, and it does raise hope, doesn't it? There's a hope. People are like, oh, great, there's something coming, because it, you know, there's not been anything really for years and years. So what do you think we can offer people in this country? So I'm just thinking, you know, we talked about that delay, you know, the US have got it. People are thinking, well, what about here? What's happening here? What can we offer?
There's been lots and lots of drug trials looking to see if reducing the plaques in people's brains actually had a benefit for their memory, their learning, their thinking, their ability to go about their daily lives. Some drugs have actually been shown to reduce the plaque load, but haven't been proven to improve their remembering skills, and it's called cognition. So cognition is everything to do with thinking, learning, problem solving, you know, that sort of thing. Alzheimer's studies are very, very difficult to do. You will all know somebody who's living with Alzheimer's, maybe a few people living with a condition. Everybody's symptoms are different. Everybody progresses differently. So there isn't like a normal. My friend Terry is living with Alzheimer's. He's plateaued, he's not deteriorated at all. And yet another one of my ladies has had a dreadful deterioration in the last 12 months. Of course, you know, lockdown and everything made that even worse. How on earth do you prove that a drug is working when everybody progresses at a different rate? It is a very difficult thing to be able to prove that a drug is working. And ultimately, that means that these trials have got to be quite lengthy, often more than 18 months, 2 years, some of them are 3 years. Some of them also go on into extensions. And they are hugely expensive to run as well, because often the MRI scans are involved. Sometimes PET scans. A PET scan is a type of scan that actually can measure the amount of plaque in your brain. And they cost around £1,500 per scan. MRI scans, you know, they're up to £1,000. Everything is very expensive. And when you're thinking about these, to actually get statistically a benefit is a very difficult thing to prove. Now, what happened on Monday was quite unusual. It was the first time ever that the FDA have approved a drug just on one study, and it's not even the full study. What Biogen did, originally they had 2 studies, and they didn't look like their results were significant statistically. And then what they did, they took the data away, and they only looked at the people who were on the higher dose of the medicine. And when they did that, it looked like that it had worked. So there is only one set, there's only one trial that they did this. There's only one set of data. This data suggests that it works. So, and the FDA have never ever in the whole history have done this before. So I think, and a lot of scientists do believe in what's called the amyloid cascade hypothesis, which again, some of you might have heard of. Basically, and it was actually Professor David Alsop from Lancaster University who wrote that back in 1991. He co-wrote it with John Hardy at UCL. But the hypothesis is that if you stop the plaques developing, then the tangles, you know, you've heard of plaques and tangles. The tangles are like a byproduct, an after product of the plaques. So if you don't get the plaques, you don't get the tangles. And if you don't get those two types of pathology, then the brain cells won't die. And therefore you will slow down or hopefully stop the progression. So that is a hypothesis. Not everybody believes in it. Personally, I do. And I would think that the vast majority of scientists do actually believe that. So the study that we have just finished recruiting for at MAC was another mechanism to stop the plaques from forming. The drug that we're working on at Lancaster University that is still in laboratory development is looking at can we stop the plaques, and also was trying to use the same technology to stop the tangles as well. I'm hoping that within the next couple of months I will also have a new Alzheimer's study coming along that also is looking at addressing the amount of plaques in the brain. And there's other stuff going on as well, as Sharon says. There's lots of studies going on. Yeah. And joint dementia research is an excellent way of being able to register your details to say, yes, I am interested. And then researchers, like for example, my team actually have got access for the, it's not open to everybody. You've got to have special training and go through special permissions. And even so, that data is I can still not use that data at all unless I get your permission. You know, everything is kept very, very safely. But because of the pandemic, it's been very difficult to recruit for studies. Usually I'm on my road show and I'm out and about and chatting to people. People like to talk to somebody about making a decision like this. And I was often, happy to chat to people who were interested but wanted to know a few more details first. Of course, the pandemic put stop to all that. So joint dementia research was so important. And I recruited nearly half the participants, our volunteers, through JDR. And I would have been stuck without it.
And I think, as Penny's alluded to there with the pandemic, actually, a lot of the researchers were pulled off. Clinical studies were suspended naturally because of the environment in the hospitals. You weren't able to get access into. Research is opening up. I think we've got between about 75 to 80 studies on there at the moment. There are currently 5 medical trials that are reopened on there. And also there's lots of other types of exciting research looking at drugs that are already used for other conditions. So one of those is understanding the effect of the diabetes 2 drug, metformin. And in some people that have Alzheimer's disease, the metformin seems to have some good effects, and in others some bad effects. Now, researchers don't really understand what the effects of metformin are on the brain cells, but that's some exciting research that's going on. There are lots of research analysing the mechanisms of Alzheimer's disease and the genetic risk factors, looking at how clustering mutations in genes affect the brain cell function, and they're looking at detecting these gene abnormalities in blood tests. So lots of exciting research.
I've got another one coming, Sharon. I don't know whether I've
mentioned it or not.
Yeah, no, we're actually using JDR. It's at the moment, you know, for people who get very frustrated and agitated,
yes,
you know, further down the journey of Alzheimer's. I know my granddad got really. He didn't know what to do with himself, and he did get very agitated, and sometimes, you know, quite. Anyway, so there is no drug that is specifically prescribed for agitation or aggression in Alzheimer's, and basically they have to use things like antipsychotics and other drugs, which basically knock people out, you know. So there's a specific drug that is going to be studied to see if it can specifically help with agitation and aggression and that frustration that can happen in people living with Alzheimer's. During the end of it. And that's coming on to, we're going to be using JDR. It's coming to MAC within the next month, Sharon. I'm just telling you now.
Yeah. So going back to Emma's initial question about obviously Biogen's drug being approved in the States, there are arguments for and arguments against it. What they are still asking to do in the States is to still gather more evidence. And of course, you know, just because they've approved it in the States, it's quite a costly drug. It's an intravenous one that needs to be done through a blood transfusion. And I think they're looking at an average cost of about $56,000 a year for somebody to pay for that. So there's a bit of controversy surrounding it. But the most exciting thing about it is this is one of a major breakthrough in medical terms for Alzheimer's, and we've not had that for a long time.
We've never had it, really. This is the first time, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The first time.
And also, the government have not given their promise of increasing the funding for dementia research. So at the Society and with other medical charities, we are really pushing policy going forward with the Conservative government to adhere to that pledge to actually increase the funding for dementia research. With the pandemic, we've taken a bit of a step back, but it's all starting to open up again. And this is your opportunity to get involved. Research needs you. You can really be part of something special to make a difference now and for future generations.
So nobody, they're being very quiet today. So I'm going to ask another question. So say I get accepted in a trial, Penny, how long would what does that mean in terms of time frame? Like how much of my life is going to be taken up by that trial? How many years? I'm going to be there for 20 years? What?
Okay, so the answer to that there isn't one answer, because every study is different. So the study that I've just finished recruiting for was called Anavex. It was targeting the plaques. And it was going to be run, it will be run over 18 months. And across that 18 months, I think there were like 9 visits. So you sort of came every other month. And it was the lengths of the visits range. So the initial visits, when you have to be sort of screened by the doctor, basically you get an MOT. You get like a personal MOT. That's really reassuring for folk actually who haven't maybe seen a doctor. You'll, you know, for a while you'll have your heart listened to, you know, with the ECGs and your blood pressure, you know, looked at. Everything is looked at, because even though, you know, people have got a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, you do actually need to be quite healthy to get onto a clinical trial, because safety is paramount. That is the one thing that is, you know, stands above everything else is safety. So if you've had you know, a heart attack recently or anything, unfortunately that would exclude you. But, you know, every study is different. However, yeah, I was talking about the repurposing of that asthma drug. So there's 2 different studies for that actually, but they're only short. One of them's 9 weeks, one of them's 12 weeks. And they're really nice studies. There's actually a compensation for that, and you travel. It doesn't cost anything. It never costs anything to be involved in research. Some companies will actually reimburse you for your time. Not usually on the Alzheimer's studies, but this one they have. It's not a huge amount. I think it's like, but one it's like £680, something like that. But ethical committees now actually are wanting people to be recompensed for their time and commitment, which is only right, actually. So, and that's like 3 or 4 visits, I can't just think off the top of my head. And everybody on those studies gets a drug, because often you've heard about having a placebo group. To prove that a drug works, unfortunately, you always have to have a control group. Nobody knows who's a control group, who is. So if I was a person on the study, I don't know. The doctor doesn't know, the nurses don't know. The only thing that knows is the computer who does the statistics. In case of an emergency, we can find out, but usually nobody knows. Sometimes you can find out right at the end. But with this asthma study, everybody gets a drug. So basically, there's 2 treatment groups. There's treatment period 1 and 2, separated by a fortnight. So you have a week on either the drug or the placebo, and then after a couple of weeks, you go into the other group and have either the treatment or the placebo. So everybody gets a drug. And it'd be really interesting, actually, to find out if people actually can tell whether they've been on the placebo or whether they've been on the drug. So no, it's going to be really interesting to find out. Because everybody knows, they won't know, whether they get the placebo first, but ultimately, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one.
Wanted to just also point out, so that's for medical trials, and Penny, that was really interesting, because that's often a question I get asked a lot. Well, how much time do I have to commit? And I'm looking after somebody at the moment. I haven't got the time to do it. So Joint Dementia Research is a really flexible service. You are never committed to taking part in a study. They understand that people whose lives are affected by dementia are on a journey. So you dip in and dip out. And if you're not able to, even if you initially matched to say something like Penny's study, if you felt that you weren't able to do it at that time, that doesn't stop you being matched to other studies in the future.
Dropped out,
but also, just to let you know,
no obligation.
Over 16,000 people took part in online studies over the last year during lockdown on joint dementia research. That means that you actually, okay, it's not going to be a medical trial, but you have equity to access of any research that's happening across the UK that you match to from the comfort of your own home.
I did one, Sharon, on my iPad. It was like a memory thing. Yeah,
there's one on there that's a study where you get a number of options. You can do it on your phone as well. And they're checking for little changes, little nuances in our brains and our patterns of memory. And this goes on to about 2040, this study. So first of all, you download the app on your phone, and it takes about 3 minutes to do every day for a month. And they give you a series of images like a squirrel and a rabbit. And they tell you, first of all, that you either have to swipe up for the picture of a rabbit and then left for a squirrel. And then they'll put the pictures in different orders, flashing up, and you've got to try and remember which way you are supposed to swipe. But that's actually looking for little changes in our brain, and that's really important for researchers to understand perhaps what causes dementia. That takes 3 minutes a day, and you do it for a month, which is great.
Thank you for those. I was just thinking, like, Penny, you talked about Terry, and obviously poor old Terry's not made it onto one of your trials yet. But he has had a brain scan every time he's applied. And I wondered if you had like a person in your head who comes to mind who has got taken part in research and they've really, really benefited from it. So just sort of case study really of someone.
Yeah, there's one lady in particular, I think, who's actually one of our sort of research ambassadors now, and she actually she used to come along with me to do talks, or she's a force on her own actually, and she goes off and is an advocate for joint dementia research. She's got a boot of flyers and what have you in her car, and she did a study, and she was very I think supported. She didn't expect it, but she got an awful lot of sort of reassurance through having the visits, because after a diagnosis, she hadn't really been back to the GP or memory clinic or anything, and then all of a sudden she was accepted onto the study, and she was coming into the clinic, every other month. And she got on well with the doctor and the neurologist and the nursing, and it was a big drive for her as well. And so I think that ultimately she felt supported medically, and she got all the results. So she got the results of the scans, and we always inform everyone's GP. And so all the results that are gathered at each visit are sent off to your doctor as well, just so that just to keep your doctor in the loop. But yeah, some people, you see, some people after a diagnosis, there's all that, maybe that period of denial and that worry and everything, and then some people just sort of take it by the horns and get on with it and start doing talks and having a different life, but still a very fulfilled life.
I really like that when you were talking about Terry, you used the word empowered, and the fact that you get scans sent to you, because I think quite often in the world of medicine it feels like we're being told stuff, things are sent to somebody else, we have to go and see somebody else, but we get the scans and they come to us, and it's sort of like that ownership, isn't it? It's my brain, and this is what my brain looks like right now. So what would you get, if I got a scan of my brain, would I also get anything? Would you look at like say for Terry's had a few scans over the years, would he just then compare them himself, or would you go, well? No,
they don't actually get the image. I suppose I've had a brain scan and I asked for the image and they gave it to me. But usually it's a report.
Okay. So
you would get the radiologist's take on a comparison. If it's a PET scan, then you actually get a figure, and the MRI scans, they can measure the size of the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that's originally, associated with that brain cell loss.
I was smiling then, because just as you said PET scan, I was like, there's a PET scan happening right here, right now.
Apologies for that. She was pouring at the door, so I had to let her in.
Don't worry. There's also 2 cats in this house. I should have made that announcement, but
mine's asleep in the garden.
I think all of the pets have been very good on this webinar. So thank you so much for taking the time to share the work that you do, the importance of research, and it does feel that it's never been more sort of in the news, more in people's mind about research, with the speed at which they brought out the COVID vaccination and with the news on Monday. So it feels like there's sort of momentum there. So I'm, for one, definitely going to be pushing this week. I do a weekly news out to folk, and I'm definitely going to be putting in about joining dementia research in there. So yes, thank you so much.
I'll send you some information with contact details that people can call on the help desk. Again, there's never any commitment. Come and have a chat with us. We'll talk to you about it. And any query or question, no question is a silly one. We're here to help you and talk to you about the exciting news that's happening at the moment.
And there's never any obligation from my side either. So I've had, we contact people from the register and they say, yes, please, because more often than not, people want to be contacted. Sometimes, oh, I'm sorry, my daughter's just expecting a baby, so I'm going to be too busy. And I've had people who've come onto a study and then something's happened and they've had to withdraw. Absolutely no obligation. You don't need to, people can walk away from it without having to explain anything. No obligation at all.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Sharon. So thank you for coming along today. Our next conversation is actually another conversation with Dr. Maggie Ellis, who will be sharing more about adaptive interactions. And that's going to be on the 23rd of June. I'll send an email out with those details. So just leaves me now to thank Penny and Sharon one more time and say take care and enjoy the weather, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.